While facing a terrifying fire-breathing dragon, the boy made a decision that felt like inviting death itself. In front of everyone, he laid his weapon down on the ground. Upon seeing this, his father was struck with terror. He thought his son was now going to face the dragon with nothing but his bare hands. But what Hiccup did next left everyone utterly stunned. Slowly, he took off his helmet and placed it on the ground. The fire dragon could sense his intentions. When Hiccup carefully reached his hand out, everyone present was filled with fear. They had never seen a dragon so calm before. His father immediately ordered the dragon trial to be stopped, but Hiccup's very next move left him completely dumbfounded. All of a sudden, the dragon was startled. It let out a tremendous roar and became wildly violent. Frightened by the dragon's attack, Hiccup began to writhe. He had nowhere to run and was soon cornered. As soon as he tried to climb the wall, the dragon struck him down with a single blow. He crashed heavily to the ground and desperately tried to crawl away, but in the very next moment, the dragon's claws pinned him down. Now everyone thought Hiccup's death was inevitable. But then something happened that no one could ever have imagined. A black dragon called Night Fury suddenly appeared to save Hiccup. The people there were witnessing such behavior from a dragon for the very first time, as up until now they had only ever seen dragons as their enemies. From birth, they had been taught just one thing: to kill dragons without mercy. Far away, in the middle of the endless ocean, stood a small island called Berk, a cold and dangerous place where survival itself was considered a battle. The people living there were no ordinary villagers. They were Vikings, fearless warriors who had spent generations battling terrifying creatures known as dragons. Life on Berk was never peaceful, as dragons attacked almost every night. Sometimes they would come flying out of the darkness like shadows, stealing sheep from the farms. At other times, they would burn entire houses to ashes with their fire. The sky would often glow red with flames while terrified villagers ran for their lives. Children on Berk grew up hearing only one lesson from the day they were born. Dragons were enemies, and if you didn't kill them first, they would kill you. The strongest warrior on the island was Stoic the Vast, the chief of Berk. He was enormous, fearless, and respected by every Viking in the village. To Stoic, a true Viking was someone who could stand face to face with a dragon and defeat it using nothing but strength and courage. But his own son, Hiccup, was nothing like the other Vikings. Hiccup was thin, awkward, and much smaller than the rest of the boys his age. While the others spent their time lifting axes and training with swords, Hiccup preferred building odd little machines from scraps of wood and metal. The villagers laughed at him constantly because they believed he was weak and useless. Nobody thought he would ever become a real Viking, not even his own father. The Hiccup understood something nobody else did. He knew he could never defeat dragons through brute strength. What he lacked in muscles, he made up for with intelligence, creativity, and imagination. One night, chaos once again descended upon Berk. The village alarm rang out loudly through the darkness as dragons appeared in the sky. Flames erupted everywhere while different species of dragons swooped down from the clouds. Some were huge and heavy like gronkles, smashing buildings apart with sheer force. Others were fast and deadly like the deadly nadders, whose sharp poisonous spikes could kill instantly. Monstrous nightmares set themselves alight before attacking, turning into living fireballs. But among all those creatures, one dragon was feared more than any other, the Night Fury. No Viking had ever properly seen it before, as it moved faster than lightning itself. It attacked silently, unleashing powerful blue blasts of fire before vanishing into the darkness once more. People called it the unholy offspring of lightning and death. As the warriors charged into battle with axes and shields, Hiccup secretly carried a contraption he'd built himself. It was designed to launch a massive iron net into the sky. Deep down, Hiccup dreamed of achieving the impossible. He wanted to bring down the mysterious Night Fury and finally prove to everyone that he was not weak. Then suddenly, a flash of blue light streaked across the night sky. A powerful explosion shook the ground nearby. Hiccup immediately realized that the Night Fury had appeared. His heart began to race as he aimed his peculiar machine into the darkness. Without wasting another moment, he pulled the trigger. The giant net shot high into the air and disappeared into the clouds. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a loud crashing sound echoed from deep within the forest. Hiccup's eyes widened in disbelief. He could barely breathe as excitement surged within him. He knew he had hit someone. He knew he had struck the Night Fury. But when he tried to tell the villagers, nobody believed him. Instead, they laughed harder than ever. To them, Hiccup was just the feeble blacksmith's son trying to make himself sound important again. The next morning, unable to stop thinking about what had happened, Hiccup secretly left the village and ventured deep into the forest. Thick trees surrounded him while silence filled the air. Eventually, he came upon a hidden valley nestled between towering cliffs, and there, lying on the ground, was the Night Fury. The dragon was enormous. His smooth black scales gleamed beneath the sunlight like polished stone. One of its wings was caught in the iron net, while part of its tail had been badly damaged. His glowing green eyes fixed on Hiccup, filled with anger, pain, and fear. For the first time in his life, Hiccup stood face to face with the creature everyone on Berk feared the most. His hands shook as he slowly drew his knife. Every lesson he had ever been taught told him the same thing: kill the dragon before it kills you. He raised the blade high above his head, ready to strike, but then the dragon looked into his eyes. In that single moment, something changed inside Hiccup. He expected to see nothing but rage in the dragon's face. Yet instead, he saw fear. The Night Fury was just as frightened as he was. It was wounded, trapped, and completely alone. Hiccup's hands slowly lumbered. He couldn't deal it. The dragon was not the monster he had imagined all his life. Carefully, Hiccup cut through the ropes of the net and freed the Night Fury. The dragon immediately tried to escape, spreading its wings and attempting to fly away. But because its tail was damaged, it lost control and nearly crashed into the ravine below. It barely survived. That was when Hiccup realized something terrible. Without help, this dragon would never fly again. Back in the village, everyone continued to believe dragons were heartless monsters. But Hiccup could no longer see them that way. He had looked into the eyes of a dragon and seen pain, fear, and loneliness. The next day, Hiccup returned to the forest carrying a fish. The Night Fury immediately became wary upon seeing him again. It growled softly, ready to defend itself if necessary, but Hiccup slowly, its mouth making it appear toothless at times. From then on, Hiccup visited Toothless every single day. Slowly, trust began to form between them. The fear that had once been there began to fade away, little by little. Hiccup carefully examined Toothless's injuries and eventually realized why he couldn't fly. Half of his tail fin was missing. Because Hiccup had spent years working with metal and tools in Gobber's forge, he knew how to make things. One night, he decided to make an artificial tail fin for Toothless. He stayed up for hours, designing and building the mechanism using leather, ropes, and bits of metal. The next morning, he carefully attached the new tail to Toothless. At first, the dragon looked confused and nervous. But after a bit of encouragement, Toothless tried flying again. For a few glorious seconds, the dragon actually lifted off the ground before immediately crashing back down. Hiccup quickly realized what the problem was. The artificial tail couldn't move by itself. Someone needed to control it manually. So he designed another mechanism, a special handle connected to the tail fin that could be operated whilst riding on Toothless's back. The first flight was utter chaos. The moment Toothless leapt into the air, both of them nearly lost control. Sometimes they shot upwards far too quickly, while at other times they plummeted towards the sea like falling stones. Strong winds nearly blew Hiccup off several times, but despite all the crashes and mistakes, they kept trying again and again. Eventually, they learned to fly together. As they soared through the clouds, Hiccup experienced something he had never felt before: freedom. The ocean sparkled beneath them while sunlight pierced through the clouds like golden beams. The cold wind rushed across his face as Toothless glided effortlessly through the sky. For the first time in his life, Hiccup truly felt alive. Meanwhile, back in Berk, dragon training had officially begun for the young Vikings. Astrid, Snotlout, Fishlegs, Roughnet and Toughnet all trained aggressively with swords, shields and axes. Everyone expected Hiccup to fail miserably as usual, but strangely, things started to change. Whenever Hiccup faced a dragon during training, he never attacked recklessly. Instead, he calmly observed their behavior. He began to understand what frightened them, what angered them, and how they reacted to fear. One day during training, Hiccup faced a deadly Nada dragon. Everyone expected him to be destroyed instantly, but instead of attacking, Hiccup slowly lowered himself and avoided eye contact, showing that he was not a threat. The dragon suddenly calmed down. It sniffed him curiously before quietly backing away. The entire arena fell silent in shock. Nobody understood how Hiccup kept succeeding without fighting. As days went by, Hiccup continued to win every challenge, which made the other trainees, especially Astrid, even more suspicious. She knew something odd was going on. Hiccup had changed completely, and she became determined to uncover his secret. Meanwhile, Hiccup and Toothless grew closer than ever. They played together in hidden valleys, hunted fish together, and even drew shapes in the dirt like children. A friendship once thought impossible was growing stronger every day. Eventually, Astrid secretly followed Hiccup into the forest. What she discovered left her utterly speechless. Hidden between the cliffs, she saw Hiccup standing peacefully beside the fearsome Night Fury. He was feeding the dragon, touching it without a hint of fear, and moments later he climbed onto its back before soaring into the sky. Astrid could hardly believe her eyes. Everything she had ever been taught suddenly seemed wrong. Furious and confused, she confronted Hiccup at once, accusing him of betraying the village by befriending a dragon. She tried to run back to warn everyone, but Toothless quickly blocked her way. Fear instantly swept across Astrid's face as the enormous dragon stood right in front of her. But instead of attacking, Toothless stayed calm. Hiccup gently reassured her before helping her climb onto Toothless's back. Though terrified at first, Astrid gradually agreed, and then Toothless soared into the sky. The moment they rose above the clouds, Astrid's fear slowly faded away. Vast oceans stretched endlessly beneath them, while mountains glowed in the sunlight. The sky looked absolutely stunning from above. For the first time, Astrid saw dragons not as monsters, but as magnificent living beings. Everything she had once believed about dragons began to unravel. And from that day forward, Astrid became Hiccup's closest ally, standing by his side as the two of them prepared to uncover the truth about dragons and change Berk forever. But just as Hiccup and Astrid were enjoying the flight, Toothless suddenly veered off course. Instead of heading back to Berk, he flew far across the ocean towards a massive rocky island surrounded by dark clouds and crashing waves. The closer they came, the stranger everything seemed. Hundreds of dragons were flying around the island, entering and leaving a gigantic cave hidden within the cliffs. Some dragons carried fish and food in their mouths, while others looked terrified, almost as though they were being forced to return there against their will. Hiccup and Astrid quickly concealed themselves, watching from a safe distance. Then all of a sudden, a horrifying roar echoed from deep within the cave. The sound was so powerful that the ground beneath them shook. Both of them instantly realized that something enormous was living inside that mountain. It was no ordinary dragon. Whatever creature was concealed in that cave was controlling all the other dragons through fear. At that moment, the truth finally became clear. The dragons were not attacking Berk because they enjoyed destroying villages. They were being forced to steal food for a far more dangerous monster hidden deep within their island. This secret changed everything Hiccup thought he knew about the war between Vikings and dragons. After discovering the terrifying truth, Toothless carried them safely back to Berk. By now, Astrid's entire way of thinking had changed. Flying through the skies and seeing the dragon's hidden world with her own eyes had made her realize that Hiccup had been right all along. Dragons were not naturally evil. Astrid wanted to tell the whole village the truth straight away, but Hiccup stopped her. He knew nobody would believe him. The moment the villagers found out that he had secretly befriended a Night Fury, they would see him as a traitor rather than listen to his warning. Hiccup understood that before revealing the truth, he first needed proof strong enough to change the minds of the whole village. A few days later, the final dragon training competition was about to take place in Berk. This was the most important event for every young Viking because the winner earned great honor and the chance to face a real dragon in combat. The villagers were especially excited about Hiccup. For the first time in his life, people were actually cheering for him. Since he had somehow managed to pass every dragon test without using brute force, many villagers had started believing that he might become a true Viking after all. Even Stoik finally began feeling proud of his son. Deep down, he believed Hiccup was finally becoming the warrior he had always wanted him to be. On the day of the final challenge, the entire village gathered around the massive arena in the center of Berk. Everyone waited eagerly as the gates slowly opened. Hiccup's final opponent was revealed to be a deadly nadder, one of the fastest and most dangerous dragons in existence. The dragon screamed furiously as it stepped into the arena, its sharp spikes glistening beneath the sunlight. But instead of raising a weapon, Hiccup remained calm. He decided to trust the same method that had worked with Toothless. Slowly, he lowered himself, avoided direct eye contact, and carefully stepped forward without showing any aggression. The villagers immediately began shouting in confusion. Nobody understood what he was doing. Even Stoik stared in shock as his son approached the dragon without a sword or shield. The nadder slowly moved closer to Hiccup, raising its deadly tail spikes. Everyone believed Hiccup was about to die. Astrid became nervous while the crowd panicked. But Hiccup kept his eyes closed, trusting the dragon. Then suddenly, the ground beneath the arena shook violently. A loud roar exploded through the air as Toothless smashed through the arena wall and charged inside. The Night Fury immediately attacked the deadly nadder, forcing it backwards. Then Toothless spread his wings protectively around Hiccup, shielding him from danger. The entire village fell silent in horror. Now everyone knew the truth. Hiccup had secretly befriended the most feared dragon in existence. Stoik's face was filled with anger and betrayal. To him, it looked as though his own son had sided with the enemy. Furious, he accused Hiccup of bringing danger into their home and betraying the entire village. Hiccup desperately tried to explain that dragons were not their enemies, but nobody wanted to listen anymore. Fear and rage had completely taken over the villages. People began shouting for Toothless to be killed. Following Stoic's orders, the Vikings surrounded Toothless with ropes and heavy nets. Despite struggling fiercely, the Night Fury was eventually captured and chained in the center of the village. Hiccup watched helplessly as his closest friend was treated like a monster once again. Then Stoic made a decision that would change everything. He announced that since they'd captured a Night Fury, they could finally force it to lead them directly to the dragon's nest. The villagers celebrated loudly, believing they had finally found the key to wiping out dragons forever. But Hiccup and Astrid knew the horrifying truth. The real danger was not the dragons, it was the giant monster controlling them all. The next morning, Stoic and his warriors boarded enormous Viking ships and sailed across the ocean towards the hidden dragon island. Toothless was chained tightly to the front of Stoic's ship so that he could guide them there. The villagers cheered proudly as the fleet disappeared over the horizon, but Hiccup stood there heartbroken because he knew they were sailing straight towards death. Back in Berk, only the children and elderly villagers were left behind. Astrid finally confronted Hiccup and told him there was no more time left. If they did nothing, Stoic and the others would be destroyed by the giant dragon hidden inside the island. Hiccup lowered his head in defeat because everyone had lost faith in him, but then something unexpected happened. The other young Vikings stepped forward to support him. For the very first time, they no longer saw Hiccup as weak or odd. They realized he was the only person who truly understood dragons. Hiccup looked around at his friends and finally understood that he was no longer alone. He explained that if they wanted to save Berk, they could not continue treating dragons as enemies. Instead, they needed to trust them and fight alongside them. The dragons locked inside the training arena could become their allies if they were treated with kindness instead of fear. That very night, Hiccup and the others secretly entered the dragon arena. Different dragons were trapped inside cages, growling angrily at anyone who approached. But Hiccup slowly walked towards them peacefully, using the same calm behavior he had learned from Toothless. He avoided direct eye contact, showed no aggression, and allowed the dragons to sense that he meant no harm. One by one, the dragons slowly accepted him. Soon, the cages were opened, and each young Viking formed a bond with a dragon of their own. At the same time, Stoic and his fleet finally reached the hidden dragon island. Guided by the chained Toothless, the Vikings stormed into the dragon nest with weapons and fire. They launched attacks throughout the cave, believing they could destroy the dragons once and for all. But then the ground suddenly began shaking violently. The ocean itself seemed to tremble as gigantic waves rose around the island. Massive cracks spread across the cliffs, while an enormous shadow slowly emerged from deep inside the cave. Then the creature revealed itself. It was the Red Death. The dragon was so enormous that it looked as though an entire mountain had come alive. Its glowing red eyes burned with hatred, while massive blasts of fire erupted from its mouth. Compared to this monster, the Viking ships looked tiny and helpless. Fear instantly swept across the soldiers. Even Stoic's face turned pale as he realized the terrible mistake he had made. Hiccup had been telling the truth all along. Meanwhile, Toothless remained trapped in chains, roaring helplessly, while the Red Death destroyed everything around him. With a single blast of fire, one Viking ship burst into flames and sank into the ocean. Soldiers began to flee in terror, while Stoic desperately ordered them to attack, even though he knew they were losing. Then suddenly, dragons appeared in the sky. The villagers looked up in shock as Hiccup and the other young Vikings arrived, riding on the backs of dragons. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. Hiccup shouted loudly for everyone to hear. The dragons are not enemies, they're allies, and the only way to survive is to trust them. Immediately, the young Vikings launched their attack against the Red Death. Astrid and her dragon attacked from above, while Fishlegs and his Gronkle dropped massive rocks onto the monster. Roughnut and Toughnut blasted fire from their two-headed dragon, while the smaller dragons distracted the giant beast by attacking its eyes and wings. The Red Death was unbelievably powerful. Every movement of its gigantic wings shook the very sky. But despite its strength, the smaller dragons kept attaching from every direction. Meanwhile, Hiccup landed near Stoic's ship and rushed towards Toothless. He desperately tried to cut through the chains, but they were too strong. Then Stoic finally stepped forward. For the first time, he admitted that he had been wrong about everything. Realizing that Hiccup had understood dragons better than anyone else, Stoic used his sword to cut Toothless free. The moment the chains broke, Toothless let out a loud roar before soaring into the sky. Hiccup immediately climbed onto his back. This was the first moment Stoic truly saw his son not as a weak boy, but as a real leader. Now the final battle truly began. While the other dragons distracted the Red Death, Hiccup and Toothless flew directly towards the giant monster. The Red Death unleashed a massive blast of fire at them, but Toothless twisted through the air at incredible speed, narrowly dodging the flames. Hiccup realized they only had one chance. He guided Toothless high above the clouds before diving downwards like lightning itself. At the perfect moment, Toothless fired a powerful plasma blast directly at the Red Death's wing. The giant dragons screamed in pain while trying to snatch them out of the sky, but Hiccup quickly turned the controls, forcing Toothless to escape at the last second. The Red Death lost its balance. The gigantic monster began crushing towards the ocean below, but before falling completely, it released one final explosion of fire directly at Hiccup and Toothless. Hiccup instantly realized they couldn't escape in time. Knowing death was near, he begged Toothless to save himself and fly away, but Toothless refused. Instead, the Night Fury wrapped his wings tightly around Hiccup, shielding him from the flames as they both fell through the burning sky together. The entire battlefield vanished beneath explosions and fire. Everyone on the ships watched in horror, believing Hiccup and Toothless were lost forever. At last, the flames faded. The Red Death's enormous body crashed lifelessly into the sea as smoke slowly cleared across the battlefield. The villagers celebrated because the giant monster had finally been defeated. Then Astrid suddenly spotted Toothless lying unconscious near the shore. Hiccup was draped across his back, completely motionless. Everyone rushed towards him in a panic. After some time, Hiccup finally opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Toothless alive beside him, and a smile spread across his face. But then he realized something else. During the battle, he had lost part of his egg. Weeks later, Burke had been completely transformed into a different world. The dragons that were once hated as enemies had become trusted companions. The villagers no longer feared them. Instead, dragons and humans now lived together like family. Children soared through the skies on dragonback, while dragons helped the villagers with fishing, carrying supplies, and protecting the island. For the first time in generations, Burke was finally at peace. And high above the ocean skies, Hiccup and Toothless continued to fly together, proving to the world that friendship was far stronger than fear.